Hey, Steve.
Hi, Steve. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
It's 4 o'clock. We are ready to rock and roll.
Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 5th, 2021 Sugarland Development Corporation meeting. I would like to call our meeting to order. Item number 3, public comment. Secretary Harris, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Okay, we're going to move to item number 4, minutes, consideration and action on the minutes on the December 15th, 2020 meeting.
Motion to
Secretary
approve.
Harris? Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
I have a motion by McCutcheon and a second by Kermali. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item number 5, orientation, review of and discussion on purpose, roles, responsibilities, and functions of the Sugarland Development Corporation. Whitney Williams, Business Development Associate.
Good afternoon, everybody. All right, next slide. Okay, good afternoon. As some of you may know, the SLDC is required to go through an annual orientation process and training based on the requirements from the Texas Economic Development Council. The purpose of the training is to ensure that officers are familiar with the city's goals and objectives as they relate to SLDC. So just as a roadmap, we'll be reviewing an overview. Can you go back? One more. Yes, thank you. Just as an overview, just as a roadmap, we'll be do an overview of the SLDC, discuss the importance of economic development and the role of SLDC, discuss permissible type A projects with examples, and then SLDC budget, bylaws, and then finish up with the annual calendar. Next. Next slide. As you can see, the role of SLDC is to promote the retention, expansion, and development of Sugarland's targeted primary industries that create or retain primary jobs within the city. This is accomplished in a variety of ways, including the primary industry recruitment program, business retention program, and marketing program. Next. The corporation was created in 1993. The 7 members of SLDC are all members of the City Council and the Mayor. SLDC is often called the 4A Corporation and receives 1/4 cent sales tax to fund the corporation and its projects. As of September 2020, the 4A Corporation has generated more than $114 million. Next. The corporation is considered a nonprofit, but unlike most nonprofits, the 4A has the power to expend tax proceeds from the 1/4 cent sales tax. Additionally, the board is required to comply with the Open Meetings Act open meetings, and open records acts. The City Council retains final oversight authority and must approve all programs and expenditures of the corporation per state law, which is accompanied through the city's annual budget process. Next. And next. So how does SLDC factor into all of this? SLDC is authorized to fund projects that create or retain primary jobs. This can also include the land, buildings, equipment, facilities, target infrastructure, and improvements. Next. In addition to creating jobs, the code also requires the projects be related to specific types of projects, which include manufacturing facilities, R&D facilities, distribution centers, and corporate headquarters, among others. Next. With that said, there are a few categories of allowable expenditures that are not required to create or to retain primary jobs. These include job training classes, certain limited infrastructure improvements, career centers outside of the taxing jurisdiction of a junior college, and the development of some commuter rail and airport facilities or port-related facilities. Next. And as you know, the corporation may use sales tax proceeds to issue bonds for projects and have done so in the past. Next. And finally, the corporation is allowed to expend funds on promotional materials and activities, though there is a 10% annual limitation. Next. Okay, you can go next. And so now we'll go over an example of some of the 2 SLDC projects. So first we'll discuss ABM. ABM is a Fortune 500 company and leading provider of facility solutions. This company will relocate their corporate shared services center to Sugar Land, and the project will result in $9 million in capital investment and the creation of 390 jobs in our community. Next. So as previously mentioned, we strive to ensure that our incentive agreements protect the taxpayer dollars by including strong clawback provisions. The most recent example is First Data. The company decided to leave Sugar Land due to industry changes, and the company was required to pay their incentive back with interest. Okay, next. And next. The board oversees funding projects for projects identified as necessary to accomplish the goals of the Economic Development Plan in accordance with the direction of City Council. As such, the board is required to follow all state laws governing the allowable uses of these funds. Accordingly, an annual budget is prepared. It is reviewed with the board prior to being acted upon by both the board and City Council. Next. So now we will go over some of the bylaws and with the annual calendar. The board is subject to rules of quorum, open meetings, and conflicts of interest. The city manager serves as the general manager, but on July 17, 2020, our city manager designated Assistant City Manager Jennifer May as the SLDC general manager. And there is also within the bylaws a requirement for funding resolutions. Next. The board typically meets at 4 p.m. on the first Tuesday of every month. And here on the screen are a few noteworthy dates for your convenience. Some of these dates, such as the EDC appointment and election of officers, have been adjusted this year due to COVID and the election. And with that, I'll take any questions you have.
Okay, are there any questions from the corporation? Okay, so there are none at this time. So with that, we will move on to item number 5, the budget. Consideration and action on fiscal year 2021 budget amendment in the amount of $790,798 from fiscal year 2020 carryover funding. Jennifer Brown, Director of Finance.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We are here this afternoon to discuss the preliminary results for fiscal year 20 for the corporation. As you're aware, we are in the middle of the audit review of the actual results. So these are unaudited and could potentially change between now and when the audit is complete. However, we have good confidence in the figures. So we're bringing those forward to you with a recommendation for carryovers. So for our revenues, we ended fiscal year 20 with actual of 7.75 million.
Jennifer,
That is,
may I interrupt you for just a second? We've had a little bit of trouble hearing you.
okay.
Secretary Harris, can you check the volume inside the chamber, please? And maybe make that a little bit louder.
Okay, and I'll try to speak up as well if that helps. It's been a little while since I've done one of these. Taking a couple of weeks off, so probably not talking very loud either.
That's better, thank you.
Is that better?
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, no problem. So, okay, so our revenues have come in at 7.75 million. That is 279,000, almost 280,000 greater than our revised budget for the fiscal year. That is primarily driven by sales tax that came in higher than our reduced projections from the impact of COVID-19. We did actually end the year with around 293,000 in additional sales tax revenue for the corporation, higher than we had estimated in our projections. And so on the expenditure side, we have operating expenditures with savings of 818,000. Our non-operating expenditures were over budget slightly slightly, I say 216,000. That is just simply a result of the categorization of a legal settlement where we had budgeted the funds to pay those out of the operating expenditures. And then the way that they got booked, they got categorized as non-operating on the income statement, just to the account that they got charged to. We are netting those out, and so we actually have total savings on the expenditures of 601,657 for the fiscal year. So that gives us a net revenue over expenditures. We are only drawing down the fund balance. We had planned on drawing it down by slightly over $1 million, $1,001,000. We are drawing it down by 119,000. So the revenues offset by the expenditures were actually 881,000 better off than we had planned in the amended budget. And so that gives us an ending available fund balance of 5.12 million, which is even better by 987,000 compared to how we our budgeted ending fund balance, because there was an additional sales tax accrual adjustment to offset that. So I know that sounds a little complicated. It's all detailed out on the income statement that is attached with the agenda item. But essentially, we are ending the fiscal year with a fund balance almost $1 million higher than we had planned for the year. And part of that is accounting entries to bring everything up to GAAP reporting standards. But the actual results are 881,000 better than we had anticipated. So we can go to the next slide, please. For the carryovers, we have two sets of operating carryovers. The first is for professional services. The biggest chunk of this is going to be for the land use plan consultant that is being split between the two corporations. And then we have 75,000 of direct incentive obligations. So the total operating carryover is $120,798. Next slide. And so included in this carryover budget amendment, the engineering department, let me back up a little bit. So this corporation is anticipated to be the funding source for the city's share of Owens Road, which is the road that's going to run through Track 2 north of 90A through the city-owned land and join up to, it's up by 1464 where that residential development is. It is a joint project. We have funds from Fort Bend County Mobility Bonds, and the estimated impact for the city share is $3.2 million. We have that built into the 5-year CIP. We did not build in any funding into fiscal year 21. We actually have that entire amount in, if you look at the 5-year forecast, it's in fiscal year 22. Engineering department is wanting to go ahead and accelerate $670,000 to begin the design work associated with this project in fiscal year 21. And with the $880,000 that we're ending the year better than planned, even after the carryovers, we still have sufficient funding from FY20 savings to go ahead and move forward with accelerating this funding. It would just reduce what we have in the out years. So we're not changing the 5-year forecast at all for the corporation from this change, and it just allows us to begin work on this project. And I believe there is a representative from engineering on the call today if you have any project-specific questions. Next slide, please. So to summarize, for the fiscal year 21 budget, what we're asking this afternoon is for a budget amendment totaling $790,798. That is made up of $120,798 in operating expenses and the $670,000 in the capital project funding for the Owens Road design. And with that, we will have an ending available fund balance of $4,434,918, which is $196,312 greater than we had showed the corporation as ending the year in the original budget for fiscal year 21. Next slide, please. And so the available fund balance that I just shared with you, the amended budget would be the $4.43 million there in the middle column. The reserve requirement or fund balance requirement for this fiscal year is 15% of budgeted sales tax, which is $831,771. And so that $4.4 million still leaves the corporation $3.6 million over the policy requirement. In the 5-year forecast, we do draw that down to fund the rest of, or we were going to fund all of Owens Road. We will still be showing the rest of the funding for Owens Road in future fiscal years. And so that would come out of that fund balance. But we're still the $196,000 better than the original budget. Next slide, please. So this afternoon, we're asking you to approve the budget amendment for this carryover. We will be including this with the carryovers that we take to the City Council on January 19th, as the bylaws of the corporation require City Council approval of any budget amendments. And then this amended budget would be reflected beginning in the financial reports, starting with the second quarter or with the January report upon City Council approval. Next slide, please. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions, Carol?
Thank you. Yeah, Jennifer, you mentioned that there was $75,000 for the SLDC's pro rata share for the land use plan. So which land use plan are you referring to?
This is for the land use plan, the update that is being split between the two, the 4A and the 4B. So the total is $75,000. It's $37,500 for each corporation.
Mm-hmm. Now, so is this the land use plan we approved, council approved a while back, or is this a new land use plan?
I can speak to that project in particular, if that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, so this is a project that came out of the 2018 land use plan. It is to develop, do research and potentially develop land use alternatives for the RAC and NAC, the Regional Activity Center and Neighborhood Activity Centers that were identified in that plan. So this is a set of projects that will allow us to understand better what other tools are out there to fully implement that part of the land use plan, and then potentially in the second phase, come in and actually do the implementation that the first phase will identify.
Oh, okay. And who's the consultant that you're using?
I believe we've just selected our consultant for the first phase. It's going to be Clarion Consulting Services. I'm sorry, I don't have their full name off the top of my head, but this is a joint project between the Office of Planning and the Office of Economic Development. We've just selected that consultant, and we're working to get them, get their contract going shortly.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Director Jacobson?
Thank you. Can we go, please, back to the slide, the FY20 budget versus actual?
Just the one you need?
No, it was the first budget number slide.
Two more.
That's it.
That one?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so Jennifer, the $818,000 under budget on expenditures, that's the money that allows us to move ahead on the Owens Road design. Is that $818,000 money that is going to have to be expended? Are we doing some deferred projects here, and we're going to have to spend that $818 at some point anyway?
No, so the 818, there was, we have this settlement from the lawsuit from Smart Financial Center that was paid from operating expenses, from savings in FY20, and so you really have to net that 818 against the 216 for the total of 601.
Mm-hmm.
So of that, it is the 120,000 is what we need to take out of that of obligations essentially from fiscal year 20, and that is what we're asking to have you approve the carryover for. The recommendation is to take the additional savings from that as well as the increased sales tax revenue from what we ended the fiscal year with, and go ahead and essentially pre-fund what we had anticipated was building into the FY22 budget for Owens Road for the design.
Okay, I did a poor job of asking the question.
Okay.
Where did that net 600 come from? How did we get that savings? Could you explain that, please?
Sure. That is comparing how we ended the year, and we lost the PowerPoint. It is taking the actual unaudited results, and so we have, if you want to look at the total expenditures line item, the 7,876,871. So that is the total expenditure. I think probably confused it by separating the operating versus non-operating, but you really want to focus on that bottom line. We had budgeted to spend $8,478,528.
Right, but how did we save all that money? What didn't we do?
So a lot of that is program savings, and some of it is the economic development incentive savings. So we had budgeted $1.1 million in economic development incentives, but we were only carrying over what was obligated from that. So there was savings of $355,000 just from that one line item. And so of that, we're carrying over $75,000. So that was a big part of the savings there. And so those are incentives. We budget $1.7 million per year by policy. And we did reduce that line item when we made the budgetary reductions from the anticipated impacts of COVID. But we only reduced, what we thought the sales tax was going to go down. The bulk of that is just on unobligated funds.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. That's what I was wondering. I didn't know how we got so smart and saved all that money, and I was wondering whether it was something that we were going to have to spend anyway in the future. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
We do budget for that every year, and so we've rebudgeted the 1.7 million in fiscal year 21. And so other than what we're asking to carry over, there's no other obligations from the remaining funds from last year.
Director Kamali.
Jennifer, Thomas, can you put the slide back up with the bullet points that talked about the 670? The first sub-bullet here, the project funding of 3.2 million of the 5-year CIP, we're budgeting this already starting in 2022. Is that correct?
Correct. It is shown that way in the 5-year CIP.
Okay. And so since we're funding it ahead of time with the 670 ahead of time, does that mean we're going to have 670,000 approximately, give or take, left over at the end?
Well, it's not actually budgeted yet, so that's why we have to ask for the budget amendment this year. But then when we go to do the fiscal year 22 CIP, what you'll see is prior funding in that project of 670,000, and then a reduction of the from that 3.2 million by that amount.
Okay. No further questions.
Okay, if there's no further questions, then, I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, Director McCutcheon.
Thank you. Yeah, going back to the slide that was up for Stuart's question, it showed that the actual revenues were higher than the budgeted revenues for the corporation for FY20. So does that mean that the sales tax was higher than, the sales tax was higher than budgeted, even in spite of COVID?
It was higher than our reduced budget. So
Okay. I was looking for the other one, the FY20 slide, a different slide. But okay, so that's what I said. So we went through and we amended the budget partway through the year, and so then it came up. So it's higher than our amended budget. Yeah. Okay, that's what I was thinking, that it wouldn't have. Okay. Yeah, this is it. 'Cause I was thinking that it wouldn't have been higher than it was originally. Okay, so higher than the amended budget.
Higher than the amended budget, which was reduced by, I want to say around 450,000 was the reduction.
Okay, yeah, I'm remembering this now. Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I just want to clarify, are we taking a vote today as directors and then it's going to council, or?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and propose for a vote for fiscal year 2021 budget amendment in the amount of $790,798 from fiscal year 2020 as carryover funding. All in favor, say aye.
So moved.
So moved.
Madam President, I didn't catch the motion in the second.
So moved. Jacobson.
Do I have a motion?
Jacobson.
Director Jacobson made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Director Kamali. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to item number 7, Director's Report. Marketing, promotions, and events, strategic and capital projects, business recruitment and retention efforts by Elizabeth Huff, Director of Economic Development.
Good afternoon, board members. This is actually Deborah Rodriguez. I'm filling in for Elizabeth today for the Director's Report, and I just have one I wanted to share with you all. You might be familiar with Fort Bend County did a small business emergency assistance grant that they started over the summertime with part of their CARES allocation that the county received. It was available to all businesses within the county. They had their first round, and then they recently authorized more funding for a second round, but we're having difficulty kind of getting the same number of applications that they did the first round. And so sort of this coalition of all of the economic development groups and staff in Fort Bend County, we did an extensive outreach. And for our staff, we had 455 businesses in Sugar Land that were previously involved in the round 1 funding. And so I just want to give kudos to our staff, Alva Pinate, Michaela Ortega, Jonathan Soriano, Whitney Williams, Tammy McCorb, and Richard, Hazel, I think is his last name. No, Hassel. I always mess it up. I apologize to Richard. But they made 455 phone calls in 2 days to these businesses to make sure that they were aware that there was a round 2 and possibly a round 3 for this funding. We received really positive feedback that they really appreciated the phone call, that they were finishing their application right then and there. And so we really hope that this has benefited a lot of the businesses in Fort Bend County to be able to get this assistance. And that's one of the things that our group has been really focused on during COVID, is making sure our businesses are aware of all the resources and funding that is available to them during this really difficult time. So a big kudos to our staff for putting that effort together and making all of those phone calls. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of them. And that is pretty much all that I have.
Okay, any questions or comments from the directors? None? Okay, well, with that, that concludes the meeting of the Sugarland Development Corporation meeting for Tuesday, January 5th, 2020. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, so moved.
Okay, our meeting is ended, and we're done.